I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, with that, I'm going to go ahead and go over to, I'm going to Diane now. Diane for a roll call.
We'll go ahead and take roll call with Commissioner Laura Wood. Present. Commissioner Jamie Melcher. Present. Commissioner Henry Wolthius.
Present.
Commissioner Jeffrey Parker.
Present.
Commissioner Evo Journey.
Present.
And Commissioner Nancy White. Thank you.
All right, so it's this time in our agenda. If there's anybody in the audience that wishes to address the commission on something that is not on this evening's agenda, this would be the time to do so. Also, a reminder, if you plan on speaking tonight, if you could fill out the little public comment card for the public record. And since there is a number of us here tonight, we would like you to keep your comments to approximately 3 minutes so that we can get through the evening in a timely fashion. Oh, yes, and we'll have you come up and state your name at the time. So if there's no other public comment regarding something not on our agenda, we'll go on to some little bit of council commission business with the meeting minutes from our last meeting. Does anybody have any corrections that need to be noted on that?
I move that we approve the minutes.
I'll second that.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. We are all present, so all those in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? All right, moving on. All right, so our first order of business. As soon as I find the front of my packet.
You need this page.
Oh, I got it right here. Thank you. So we're going to go ahead and open the public hearing for ZMA 23-03 at 6:34. The applicant has proposed to rezone an existing 88,577 square feet of vacant parcel of residential low-density R1 zone to the high-density residential R3 zone. The subject property is located south of Long Street and east of 29th Avenue and is identified by Lynn County Tax Assessor Map as 13 South, 01 East, 32 AC, Tax Lot 4900. The proposed zone change would bring the zoning designation into conformity with the property's existing comprehensive plan map designation. The Planning Commission will hold a public hearing, make a recommendation to the City Council, and the City Council will hold a public hearing and decide on this application. All right. The applicable substantive criteria are listed in the staff report. Testimony, arguments, and evidence must be directed toward the criteria described or other criteria in the plan or land use regulation which the person believes to apply to the decision. Failure to raise an issue accompanied by statements or evidence sufficient to afford the decision maker and the parties an opportunity to respond to the issue precludes the appeal to the Land Use Board of Appeals based on that issue. With that being read in, do any of the commissioners have any personal bias against this application?
No.
No.
I have none. Any conflicts of interest?
No.
None.
I have none. Any ex parte information?
No.
No.
I also have none. So at this point, we'll go ahead and go over for the staff report.
Actually going to be me.
Oh,
Probably
okay.
my last staff reports. All right. I'm gonna try to get through it because I'm that lovely voice thing going on again. Right. As Chairman Parker said, this is an application proposing to rezone an existing 88,577 square foot vacant parcel from residential low density to high density residential zone. The subject property the property is currently zoned residential low density and the comprehensive plan designation is residential high density. which would bring the zone map into conformity with the property's existing comprehensive plan map. Based on the FEMA maps, the subject property is not in a 100-year floodplain. The subject property does not show wetland or does show a wetland drainage on the property that is depicted on the Sweet Home Local Wetlands Inventory map. The drainage is identified as SSR 18C, which flows through the northeast corner of the property. That means it's South Santiam River, South Santiam that it connects to. So the subject property has frontage along Long Street and 29th Avenue. The subject property has access to city water and sewer services from Long Street and 29th Avenue. Right, jump to the review. I'm sorry. I love this time of year. The proposed zone is appropriate for the comprehensive plan land use designation on the property and is consistent with the description and policies for the applicable comprehensive plan land use classification. The subject property has a comprehensive plan designation of residential high density R3. The Sweet Home zoning map is proposed to change from the residential low density R1 zone to the residential high density R3 zone. The proposed zone change would bring the zoning designation into conformity with the property's existing comprehensive plan map designation and is consistent with the description and policies of the R3 zone. The uses permitted in the proposed zone can be accommodated on the proposed site without exceeding its physical capacity. The uses permitted in Sweet Home Municipal Code 17.14.020, 17.14030, and 17.14040 can be accommodated on the subject property without exceeding its physical capacity. The subject property is approximately 88,577 square feet, 2.02 acres. The R3 zone density requirements for single-family attached, detached homes, and duplexes are no more than one residential structure per lot or parcel other than an approved accessory dwelling unit, maximum of 12 dwelling units per net acre. The R3 zone density requirements for multifamily is a maximum of 28 units per net acre. Allowed uses in the proposed zone can be established in compliance with the development requirements in the development code. All development in the R3 zone shall comply with the applicable provisions of this development code. The following references additional development requirements in Sweet Home Municipal Code 17.14.070. A, off-street parking. All single-family homes and duplexes shall require a garage or carport, and in addition provide two hard surface parking spaces. Other uses identified in the zone shall comply with provisions in Chapter 17.44. Signs shall conform to the standard contained in Chapter 17.50. Fences shall conform to the provisions contained in Chapter 17.52. Landscaping improvements shall conform to provisions contained in Chapter 17.54. Yards and lots shall conform to provisions contained in Chapter 17.56. And other, a property owner is advised other regulations may apply for property in an identified natural resource area, Chapter 17.28, the flood hazard area, Chapter 17.30, and in or near an identified historic site, Chapter 17.32. Adequate public facilities, services, and transportation networks are in place or are planned to be provided concurrently with the development of this property. The subject property is proposed to change from residential low density R1 zone to the residential high density R3 zone. The zone change would bring the zoning designation into conformity with the property's existing comprehensive plan designation and is consistent with the Sweet Home Transportation System Plan, the TSP. The Sweet Home Infrastructure Map and Local Wetland Inventory Map show wetland stormwater drainage identified as SSR-18C flowing through the northeast corner of the subject property and south along the east property line. The Sweet Home Infrastructure Map shows a second stormwater drainage running from Long Street to 29th Avenue. That's in your Attachment B map and Attachment B. The adequate public facilities, services, and transportation networks are planned to be provided concurrently with the development of the property. No development has been proposed with this application. For residential zone changes, the criteria listed in the proposed statement for the proposed residential zone shall be met. The purpose of the R3 zone is to provide areas suitable and desirable for high-density residential development, and particularly for apartments, but where other types of residential and related public services uses are appropriate. The R3 zone is most appropriate in areas which have been developed for high-density residential use or which are suitable for such use due to the proximity to downtown Sweet Home and to highway-related commercial areas inside the city. per Sweet Home Municipal Code 17.14.010. The uses submitted in Sweet Home Municipal Code 17.14020, 17.14030, and 17.14040 can be accommodated on the subject property without exceeding its physical capacity. No development has been proposed with this application. Conclusion and recommendation. Based on the findings listed in Section 3 of this report, staff recommends the Planning Commission recommend that the City Council approve this application. Since the request is for a zone change, staff has not recommended any conditions of approval. In acting on a zone change application, the Planning Commission will hold a public hearing at which it may either recommend that the City Council approve or deny the application. The recommendation should be based on the applicable review and design criteria. The City Council will hold a public hearing and decide on this application. For a motion after opening the public hearing and receiving testimony, the Planning Commission's options include the following. Move to recommend that the City Council approve application ZMA 23-03, which includes adopting the findings of fact listed in the staff report. Number 2, move to recommend that the City Council deny application ZMA 23-03, and you must specify a reason. 3, move to continue the public hearing to a date and time certain, or 4 other. Questions of staff?
Sorry. Okay. So at this time, we would invite our applicant to come forward if they're here. And for the record, after you have a seat, if you could state your name and address.
Good evening. Is this on?
Yes.
Great, thank you. My name is Laura LaRock with Udall Engineering and Land Surveying. I'm representing the applicant on this application for L Ventures for the property. So thank you, Angela, for giving a very thorough staff report for the proposal. I'll keep my comments brief.
Thank you.
How she did such a thorough job. So as you are aware, the application before you is for a zone map amendment. With a zone map amendment is a quasi-judicial land use decisions where the Planning Commission gives a recommendation to City Council and City Council makes the final decision. In deciding on this matter, there's 5 review criteria that's spelled out in the Sweet Home Development Code that's taken into consideration of approval or denial of the application. The first review criteria simply says, is the zone map amendment consistent with a comprehensive plan? So as you are aware, there's 2 guiding maps for the city. One is the zone map, which is for the current conditions of the city. The second map is referred to as the comprehensive plan. This map is based on studies and projections about where the community is headed over a 20-year planning horizon. So in this case, for a residential zone, they take a look at housing needs for the community as they're projected to be out in a planning horizon of 20 years and make sure that there's adequate space to accommodate the needed residential development for the community. So on this particular application, the zone that is requested complies with the comprehensive plan. So it's in line with what the city envisions for this location within the community in the future. The second review criteria talks about uses being permitted. Can uses be accommodated on the property once the zoning designation is applied? Uses in this zone, the R3 zone, are pretty broad. They're anywhere from a single family detached dwelling up to a multifamily development. So when the site is developed, we can take a look at those uses or a combination of those uses. Regardless, the property is 2 acres in size. It has adequate street frontage and access to public utility. So it will be able to serve any number of those uses that are permitted within the zone. The third criteria talks about, uses. It says allowed uses on the proposed zone can be established in compliance with the development code requirements. So in this case, it's really hypothetical. We're looking at a 2-acre site. We do not have a development proposal in conjunction with the zone map amendment. So we look sheerly at size. The development code has different sizing provisions based on housing types. So a single family dwelling, for example, requires 5,000 square feet. Because the property size, width, and depth, it well exceeds any of the minimum standards for any of those residential zones. So any number of those uses could be permitted and constructed on this in accordance to the development code under the proposed zoning designation. The fourth review criteria takes a look and says if things were to be developed that's permitted within the zone, the R3 zone in this case, can they be adequately served by public utilities? So in this case, we take a look to say, is public water main, sewer, storm services, the street transportation plan, are those adequate to support future residential development on the site? All these public utilities are adjacent, either in along the street frontages along the site, or could be brought to the site at the time a development proposal is brought before you. So there's no concerns that there's ability to connect or improve those to support any sort of development on this site in accordance with the R3 zone. Criteria 3, so the last criteria talks about residential zone changes. Does it fit the purpose statement? So the purpose statement is essentially pretty broad. It talks about that the zone that's proposed, the R3 zone, is suitable and desirable for high density residential, particularly where apartments or any other types of residential or related public services are appropriate. So again, it's saying that any number of uses could be permitted here. And since there's not a development proposal before you today, but the size of the site is adequate to support any of those. So with that, I'll wrap up the presentation. I don't know if that was really brief, but turn it over to the commission if you have any questions.
Does anybody have any questions for our applicant? We have some wetlands on this property. So what percentage of the property is covered by a wetland and what percentage is actually usable?
On this site, because there's not a development proposal, we have not done a wetland delineation. Delineation would mark the boundaries of a wetland.
Mhm.
So we've not had a wetland specialist out there to delineate the site to show what percentage wetlands are. However, there is
That would
drainage
come when you
facilities.
have more of a development proposal.
Yes, so wetland delineation would likely be conducted before a development proposal is put together on the site to make sure that any proposed lots are not infringing in those areas.
As far as, because there is no, development proposal, which is common, is there like a time frame for a development proposal if it were to be approved? Is it something that they are hoping to move on quickly and develop the property, quickly, or do they want to divide it and, sell? What kind of time frame is that property looking at, or do you have that information for us?
Yeah, so that's not a part of the review criteria, but I can provide some background to that. We are in a time of kind of uncertainty. Prices are going up. We're not quite sure where the market's going. At this point in time, there's not a development plan, not even conceptual that has been drawn. It really is kind of on hold until the outcome of this hearing is complete.
All right, does anybody else have any questions for our applicant?
Okay.
All right.
Thank you so much for your time.
I invite you to stay around in case we need to bring you back up for a rebuttal. So at this time, we're looking for proponent testimony. That's testimony in favor of the application. Somebody wishing to speak in favor of the application. All right, so here we go. Those wishing to speak in opposition of the testimony, if you'd like to be heard, just raise your hand. Come on up. And for the record, after you have a seat, if you could state your name and address.
Michael Diolis, address is 1193 29th Avenue, Sweet Home, Oregon. And I'm in strong opposition to this, along with several other my neighbors that are sitting behind me. I guess main concern, I'm going to touch on a few, the wetland. There's quite a bit of water running through there right now as we speak, and I do have big concerns about that, especially if apartments go through there. Schools and services, changes to the character of our neighborhood, noise and disruption, traffic and parking, and property values is a big concern of all of ours. And another topic that I believe that this would fall under a type of zoning, like zoning, let's see what I'm looking for. It's been a while since I've done any public speaking. Spot zoning, basically, is what this comes down to. I sent in an email on November 7th. I didn't see that letter sitting on the counter, but I covered the issues of spot zoning and this of specific parcels went, and basically this shows, to me, shows favoritism to a developer. There's no benefit to anybody in the community, for our community in the neighborhood, for spot zoning. We're going to be burdened with noise, traffic. The schools are going to be burdened. There's just so many things that that this would fall under, and it doesn't, in my opinion, doesn't stay consistent with the development of our community. It's a low density community. We do still have a lot of traffic, but if we do high density, it concerns me of the safety of our kids walking to and from school. That little grade school that's around the corner. And I'm sure all of you have been down Long Street, and there's that dip. That speed is something atrocious. And I worry every day about our kids walking to school and then changing our community to a high density. That's first and foremost my biggest concern. And we have a lot of deer that cross through there.
Mhm.
And I don't know how many times I've seen cars speeding through there and slamming on their brakes. Yes, that's deer, but how about our kids? I'm a little concerned of this,
Okay.
just as well as the rest of the neighbors in the community. So,
All right. And I want to assure you that we did actually receive a copy of your email.
okay, very
We
good.
have it in our.
Thank you. I did not see it over there. So-
Okay. Thank you.
One more thing.
Yes.
As I canvassed the neighborhood, I went down and around to Kalamaya, and there's a lot of folks down there that did not even receive a letter. How far out do these letters go?
I believe it's 100 feet
So,
beyond.
no, for a zone
Oh,
map
it's
amendment, it's 300 feet from
Okay.
the borders of the property. So it only goes out to 300 feet. Anybody within that 300-foot area. So if there's someone just on the other side of that, they wouldn't get it. So, and yes, anybody that submitted a comment before the comment period ended, it went in the packet. Anybody after that, we submitted it to them
Very good.
today.
Okay, thank
So
you.
yours was in the packet.
Okay. And I just mentioned Kalamaya Street because these neighborhoods are going to be impacted by the influx of more traffic.
Correct.
Okay, that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Does anybody else wish to come forward and? If you could just state your name and address for the record.
My name is Mackenzie Shear. My address is 1184 29th Avenue. I would like to express mine and my husband's opposition to the rezoning of this lot. We actually purchased the home directly across from the lot. We're young kids, not that young anymore, but we did realize, this could be developed at some point. Rezoned was not in our game plan. So we purchased this home knowing that surrounding it is a bunch of single family homes. We loved that. We do feel that rezoning this lot is not in the best interest of the neighborhood and would only benefit the private owners of the rezoned lot. We feel that Sweet Home has been a community that runs on uplifting each other and improving the quality of living. The slogan is Oregon at its best. We feel like rezoning this would change that. It's not Oregon at its best. This is private ownership at its best. We definitely feel like with the increased traffic, we feel that the neighborhood would be, sorry, I'm not a public speaker.
No, it's
So
fine.
we feel like the neighborhood would be unsafe for the multitude of Hawthorne students. We plan on having a Hawthorne student. So that was kind of one of the benefits we liked of being right there, is saying, hey, when you're old enough, you can walk to school. If more traffic ends up down this road, that's not happening. We also do know that a sidewalk could be installed on that side, have we change our rezoning. Oftentimes, the private owners will ask the neighborhood to foot that bill. As I'm sure you guys are aware, Sweet Home is not a wealthy community. A lot of our neighbors are struggling to make ends meet. It would not be fiscally responsible of any of us to be asked to foot that bill, nor could we, and nor should we. And then obviously depreciating property values is a big concern of ours. We are first-time home buyers. We don't plan on living in that particular house for 35 years. It'd be great. But, most of the time property owners, we do see a dip in our value with the economic circumstances of our nation, that will fluctuate. If you add and you rezone and you add all of these apartments right there, we feel that that's a deficit we won't come back from. That's not something that would fluctuate with our economic standpoint in our nation. That's something we would just take that, we'd have to eat it. We also feel that our resale opportunities would become much slimmer. Kids my age would not want to live next to an apartment when you just got done living in apartments. So it is our hope that our community members and our community representatives listen to us and value our opinions. And we hope that we can come to a compromise. So that's all.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
Forgive my redundancy, but if you could state your name and address for the record, I would appreciate it.
Alan Majors, 3107 Long Street. Unlike the previous speaker, I am going to be in my home for the rest of my life. My wife and I worked very hard to get it, and my property line is the longest line on that red stretch that I see on that map. When I bought that property, it was the understanding that was an easement. There is a natural waterway that runs through that. My children, several children of the neighborhood have used that, played in it. Ethel Yoder was my neighbor. She was 98 when she passed. She talked about riding her horse over that creek. So it's been a part of that neighborhood for a very long time. And for them to completely destroy it, no, it's, I left my glasses. The quote, people destroy things created by God. They're called developers. If you destroy something irreplaceable by God, they're developers. Replaceable by man, they're called vandals. That ain't gonna save it. The mushy stuff never does. But I do work for the school. And we just rezoned because there were apartment buildings built on either side of Hawthorne, you're aware, and a housing development also. I'm also the crossing guard out there. And it is dangerous for my children. My job is protecting children. And all the children of the Ashbrook neighborhood go right by that intersection every morning and every afternoon. And they say, well, we don't know what we're going to put up there. We might just put up regular houses. Well, if you put up regular houses, you don't need to rezone it. Leave it like it is. That's great. But if you're putting up apartment buildings and they're saying, hey, rezone it, we'll let you know what we're going to do later, that gives them the option to go, oh, hey, now we can put up 28 units per acre. That's 56 units right next to my school. It is already overburdened. We've got 28 students per class. We don't have any more room. That's why we just resectioned. And having a high density unit, the area right down on Clark Mill Road too. I'm not sure I understand that's going to be developed as well. Is that true?
I believe that was quite a while back with the
Yeah, it is
rezoning
in
of that
April.
parcel.
And so, haven't? Oh, good. But I know
Yeah.
zoning has been changed, so it is high density now. So, wow, 2 high densities right on either side. I didn't realize that was happening. I got the letter, I was busy, and I really regret it, but I'm gonna do what I can to save and stop this one. Because high density, 2 high density right next to my school with a couple of, they want the 20-year ahead, build our schools first. Get another school or add to our schools substantially before you put any more high density into our neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you. I do wish we had a little more control over our schools, but unfortunately, as the Planning Commission, we do not. So.
Good evening, Justin Prophet. I stay at 3113 Long Street. It's literally right next to the school. Like the last 2 or 3 that came and spoke, what brought me to this property, I work down in Springfield, so actually this small community is what drew me to this property. It wasn't crowded, it wasn't a lot of apartments like Eugene and Springfield were. I wasn't aware that there was any thoughts of rezoning the property. Would have kind of drove me away from coming here. Like Alan said, the traffic in the morning with the kids is pretty rough. You know, living next to the school, I don't see it during the week, and they're not there on the weekend. But I can only imagine my wife there all day with the noise. And I know as you drive further down Long Street, the property value, there's already apartments that were, I don't think they were there long, but you can tell the property value kind of it diminishes further down you drive the street. So like that little dip everybody talks about, I feel our property above the dip, it just looks better, you know. And then as you go down around the dip, it looks pretty rough. So if you pack apartments into that little area there, I feel it's gonna bring the value down, you know, which in turn would have drove me away from even coming here in the first place. So I'm just against rezoning the property.
All right, thank you very much.
Julie Whitmore Parks, 2749 Kelmaya Street. I live around the corner and I have been there for over 20 years. And I think allowing this high density zoning would just be very detrimental to this neighborhood. I know that there's not one house that I couldn't go to on any street to or from, and I'm on Kelmaya, but I know there's not one person I couldn't go to for help if I personally needed it. I just think this would just be detrimental to the entire neighborhood. Just the traffic would just be awful, and there's a safety concern for the kids. And believe me, I'm one of the mamas and the grandmas that watch the kids go up and down the street, and if there's an issue, they know they can come to my house.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Anybody else like to come forward and speak? All right. So at this
Chairman,
time,
Can I add something
yes.
really quick? So the drainage, the wetland drainage that goes across the property, the wetland is actually across Long Street to the north. The wetland itself is not, and it's on our local wetland inventory. So it's on the northern property across the street. The drainage that comes down through, it is a drainage from that. So the wetland itself, the entirety, should have brought this up so I could bring it up on the screen, is actually right on the property. So it's going to be to the one kind of catty corner where it says subject property on there. So it's that property that the wetland is actually on, and then the stormwater drainage from that wetland actually comes down through the property. So the majority of the wetland itself is not on that property. There are two stormwater drainage though on that, and one of them stems from that wetland. So just want to clarify that and make sure that that is clear, that the majority of the wetland itself is across the street. It's just a drainage, part of that is a drainage from that wetland.
Stormwater drains from the wetlands onto the property.
Correct, and there's two, it kind of, the one map I show you, see the purple lines, the purple means stormwater on those, and one of them, the one on the eastern side is the one that drains from that wetland that's across the street to the north.
All right. At this time, moving forward, we would look for any neutral testimony, not wishing to speak in favor or against, just wishing to be heard. All right. As there are none, I would give this opportunity if the applicant would wish to come forward for any kind of rebuttal statements in regards to what they've heard. And again, for the record, if you could state your name and address.
Yeah, thank you. So Laura LaRocque with Udell Engineering and Land Survey. Thank you for the opportunity to address some of the concerns. I have read all the letters that have been submitted and listened to the testimony presented this evening. It sounds like the concerns kind of fall into a couple different categories: natural resources, maybe potential impacts on future development on those, traffic, and then concerns about property values is kind of where those fall as far as what I've heard. A lot of the comments that are submitted are really projecting what sort of development may occur on the site and what kind of potential impacts that development may have on natural resources, traffic, and potentially how it trickles down to schools and things of that nature. These are all concerns that will be better addressed and fleshed out with an actual development proposal. So if and when the site ever does develop, we will work the way through the development code to take a look at permitted uses, what would be a good fit based on the conditions of the site, as well as the improvement standards that the city has in place through the Development Code and Public Works Engineering Standards to make sure that there's adequate drainage, easements, protections of natural resources, buffers, and that if density is such that it may trigger some or even create some traffic impacts, that there's a traffic study that's performed so that we can take a look to see if there's any sort of off-site mitigations or things of that nature. But right now, the proposal is just limited strictly to a zone map amendment to change it to be consistent with the city comprehensive plan. And these other concerns and items will be better addressed when a development proposal, if and when a development proposal is put together for the site. However, we'll open it up again for any questions that might have come up after listening to the folks' concerns that were brought forward.
Any questions for our applicant? All right.
Okay, thank you again.
Thank you so much. Yes.
I wanted to address one item that was brought up, was the idea that as part of any future development of, say, sidewalks or something similar, that it could impact them, and then the neighbors might be asked to pay for things like that. The only way that that happens in the city is when there isn't a developer involved. For example, there's a local improvement district that was approved for the Willow and Yucca streets, and that doesn't have a developer, and so there were property owners that petitioned to have that local improvement district, and all the people who own property within that district will end up paying for a large portion of that improvement. In this particular area, we already have full street improvements in existence and all of the utilities. Their only remaining portion would be the sidewalk that's adjacent to this property. That would be part of any development application where the developer would be required to continue that sidewalk. And given the position of that property and its position close to the corner of Long Street, we would also seek to have them continue the sidewalk all the way to Long, despite the gap that would be in front of the house on the corner. So there's no way for us to force the neighborhood to pay for what development should be paying for, and any development application that comes to us would include those kinds of improvements.
All right. So at this time, we're going to close the public hearing for discussion amongst the Planning Commission at 7:09. So here's the difficulty ahead of us. We have questions and concerns about the density in the area. We're all aware of the traffic problems along Long Street. As a general comment, I will say that the comprehensive plan map is on the website and does show areas identified within Sweet Home that are looking to get rezoned at some time in the next 20 years. Keep in mind that there are no timelines associated with that as far as requirements to rezone any one section at any one time by a certain time. So
I guess for staff, any development proposal on this lot besides just a single family duplex or triplex would come before the Planning Commission for review?
No, when someone applies to develop property and it's something that's outright permitted, then it does not come before the Planning Commission. They would have to satisfy the criteria that are within the development code and would have to satisfy state building code. And that's typical of pretty much every development. I don't think we ever have, the only time we ever have individual developments coming before the Planning Commission is when it's some sort of planned development. Even subdivisions, it's just when subdivisions come before the Planning Commission, it's approving the lots themselves and the layout of the streets. You don't approve the actual buildings and how they're set up. So yes, if this zoning change stays the same in R1, then it would pretty much be a staff matter unless they do a subdivision. If it's changed to R3, then it would be, again, staff working with them unless they were doing something that required a conditional use. But most likely they would not. They would just have to fit within the criteria in our development code.
If an application were submitted for a development of that property, would neighbors get notice of that?
Typically, those notices go out when there is a land use decision. And in this case, the zone change would be the land use decision. If they did a conditional use, then there would be a notice for that. But for anything that's outright permitted, there would not be another hearing on that.
Okay.
I do want to add on traffic and transportation. As you may or may not remember from our putting in our new development code, there are certain criteria that govern when a traffic impact study is required for a development. And there's a number of those things. It depends on, the estimated average daily trips and the conditions in the immediate area. And so that's something that we would be keeping our eyes on when it comes to any development here. We certainly want to ensure that future development in the city is safe and utilizes our our transportation system properly. And I would recommend that, and this is a shameless plug, we're having an open house on November 29th for our transportation system plan update. And I would love to see you all there, because these big long range plans that we put together, like the comprehensive plan, is where the most good can be done when it comes to the way you want your community to be designed. And so November 29th at 6:30 here, come and take a look at the next 20 years of transportation in Sweet Home. And then we also, and it's a good idea to get on the city's notification list for different city meetings, because we are seeking to update our comprehensive plan also. And that could help you be notified so that you could be involved in how the comprehensive plan changes, because it's the comprehensive plan designation for this property that is allowed it to come to this point.
And we do have a vacant chair down there.
Oh, and there's a vacancy on the planning commission. So feel free to see me if you're interested in serving.
The job pays nothing and people stare you down. There you go. All right, so continuing discussion amongst the planning commission in regards to the application in front of us.
So I have a question for staff. One of the presenters talked about spot zoning, and my understanding of the definition of spot zoning doesn't quite match how he was describing it. So I just want some clarification about that, because we do try to address concerns that are brought to us by concerned citizens. So my understanding is that spot zoning applies to special zoning laws that are different from the more general zoning laws around them. So I think one of the concerns was that something could be that zoning that property as an R3 was out of character with the surrounding. But if you look at the comprehensive plan, it's not. If you look at the comprehensive plan, there's R3 on both sides of Long. And as we just stated, there's property nearby that's just been changed over. So can you help to clarify some of that?
Spot zoning is a term that is commonly used to say that somebody arbitrarily took a certain spot and changed the zoning to something that is much different than the areas surrounding it. That's typically what people mean when they talk about spot zoning. Most of the time, spot zoning doesn't take into account the comprehensive plan. And so if we were adjusting the comprehensive plan and you were and this was all comprehensive plan designated as low density residential, and then you were to select one part in the middle of it and say, we're going to change the comprehensive plan designation for that property and the zoning to high density, then certainly I would say that sounds like spot zoning to me.
Right.
But the way the system is supposed to work with the comprehensive plan is you have a comprehensive plan created that says this is what the future vision of the whole city is. And the idea is to get as much public input on there so that you can plan appropriately for where a commercial area is supposed to be, where should they grow to, where are the high density residential, where are the industrial areas, with an eye for the next 20 years or more of how are those things supposed to grow. And once you have that comprehensive plan in place, there's a map that accompanies it. At that point, once that's adopted, then the zone map basically plays catch up. And because each property owner has a right to the current zoning on their property, that change from the zone map to the comprehensive plan map takes time and may never be completed, because it's up to the property owner has rights regarding what their current zoning is. And so at some point you have to have something moved closer to the comprehensive plan. In this case, Long Street is an arterial road. It is the main artery next to Main Street, basically the second most important road in the city. And so the comprehensive plan map and the comprehensive plan was designated to say, okay, these arteries those are higher traffic areas that should have the higher density uses along them. And that's why you have all the commercial property along Main Street. You have commercial property along Long that's further toward the downtown, and you have higher density residential planned all along Long Street. And true, a lot of those things haven't gotten there yet, but that's kind of where it's going. I will add that immediately to the south of this property, although it is zoned R1, immediately to the south of this property is an apartment complex.
Anybody have any further discussion?
Oh, we're each going to take our turn. Am I okay?
There you go.
Okay. I have several thoughts that have evolved as we've had this discussion. First of all, I would want the citizens of our community to know that we listen and that you're not speaking to deaf ears. Secondly, if I were to buy a home in an R1 zone, I think that would be a preferential continuation. That's why we buy in an R1 zone. We've had professional people that have helped us put together a comprehensive plan, but there's two things that enter into that. That professional person, which we tended to agree to as a planning commission, revised that, and our comprehensive plan is a little different, admittedly. Secondly, we've had an abundance of apartment buildings lately, and I have a feeling that there really isn't a shortage, or that there are no other sites that they could build on. Admittedly, with some of the comments that have been made tonight, can you hear me back there? Is it with apartments? There is a concern that it is a rapid family turnover, that they usually do not have the pride of ownership unless the manager has that, like the adjacent R1 property owners. I personally feel that change has to be shown as a need, and that there has to be good reason for it on the part of the applicant. And as far as the sidewalks are concerned, Blair has already addressed the fact that sidewalks, if it were rezoned, and if there was a multifamily development, But we would probably necessitate those sidewalks to Long Street. But we have no assurance of that. That's Blair's opinion tonight. And with all the comments that have been said tonight, obviously the greatest benefit would be to a developer. And with that said, got to keep my thoughts going here. With that said, the primary concerns should be the people that are living there. I know that there's an apartment complex just to the south of this, but certainly the default would be to maintain what the current zone is. And those are some of my opinions, and I would lean in that direction.
So our main thing that we are looking at, the reason for this change is to bring it in line with the comprehensive plan. And the emotions of living next to an apartment building don't really play into it. It's right there on the map what it's supposed to be. I wouldn't want to live next to a large apartment building. And I'm sorry. But can we make our decision on the emotions, or do we have to look at what the plan says?
I'm sorry that at this portion it's closed to public comment for discussion amongst the commission.
If the comprehensive plan were the prevailing law, we wouldn't need to be here tonight. We're here tonight because we have to respect the zone that is already in place. And then it becomes our responsibility, if we want to change that zone to match up with the comprehensive plan. But if the comprehensive plan already prevailed, we wouldn't even be here talking about this issue.
True.
Can I ask? So it's the property owner's decision if they want to bring it into compliance with the comprehensive plan, not our decision, correct, Blair? It's where the comprehensive plan is there. What you said was it awaits the property owner to request that change, and then that's when it becomes.
Typically, yes, a property owner has a right to that current zoning, and then when there is if they wish to take advantage of the designation that's offered by the comprehensive plan, then they could seek to have that changed. I would just a correction. The development code that we have put in place outlines all the criteria for all of the changes, and so the reason why it's definitely not a given that something moves from the comprehensive plan designation to the zoning map. The way that it's done is through the various criteria that are listed in the code. And so the decision is simply to look at the criteria and does this fall within the criteria in our code of whether it should be changed or not. Those are the things that the Planning Commission has the authority to rule on. And as just as a word of caution, the times when we deviate from what the criteria given in the code are the times that we expose ourselves to liability and appeal to the Land Use Board of Appeals.
Well, when I looked at what we had on our agenda today, I thought we would probably hear from quite a few community members because of the location of the property. Because we've seen and heard from community members near Clark Mill Road on the corner of Clark Mill and Long Street before when it comes to rezoning or developing a property. The concerns are all, I believe, valid traffic concerns or safety concerns for what might be, but it's about what might be, and there is nothing for us to make a decision on there. It's all hypothetical. We want to keep the community safe and thriving. We want our community to grow and support the people who live here. Part of that, as we know from last year, is increasing the housing availability in Sweet Home. We have a duty to do that as the Planning Commission. And part of that is expanding the high density zoning areas of our community. They are not easy changes to make because they typically are, when they're changed, it's changing people's neighborhoods. And so I take that seriously, and I understand. I have lived in a place where there was nothing behind me but beautiful nature for years, and have it then developed, and then look at rooftops and houses, and you have a new type of neighborhood. It feels new and you think it's going to get worse. But then it's still quiet, and you still have neighbors who are your friends, and those neighbors who you could rely on are still next door. And I believe that families that can't afford to live in a single family home in Sweet Home deserve to live in quiet neighborhoods near schools as well. So that high density residential zoning, I don't believe it has to stay out of places that are currently low density, because I believe that young families need access to be near to schools, and we don't have a lot of access for young families to be housed in Sweet Home.
So I have 2 points that have been brought up. So Laura, to yours, we did have the housing needs assessment done last year. We spent a year being briefed on housing needs for Sweet Home, and clearly apartments of various configurations was seen as a great need for middle. I don't want to be labeling things, but for people who can't maybe afford a single family home, have a decent place to live in a decent neighborhood.
I think it was something like 60% of our residents live below the income they need to housing.
Yeah, the rent burden.
The rent burden. Here.
Yeah,
yes.
and we had a deficit in that regard. The other thing is that over the years, we've had other zoning changes requests come in front of us, and we have debated what is our responsibility to the community in terms of looking to the future. So, yes, there's a status quo in this area that's functional, that works, that's loved, that's lived in. We have a model for how Sweet Home can look in the future, and you can add that 5 years, 10 years, whatever. We have been pretty committed to using that vision for the future as one of the ways to look at what we're doing now, to help maybe frame our decisions. But the other thing is, and I think this is really important, and Blair has emphasized this time and time again, that our job is to make sure that all the criteria in the application are met, and all the criteria in the application are met.
Really quickly, I don't want to take up too much more time for the commission. I know that the comprehensive plan map was done and adopted most recently in September of 22. But if one were to look a little bit closer at this property, it doesn't actually touch Long Street. Therefore, in my opinion, the R3 comprehensive plan map designation for this should have stopped at 29th Avenue and not continued out Long, and then continued as it has between Long and Main in those areas in accordance with the distance from the highway. But seeing as this property doesn't actually physically touch Long Street, it's in my opinion that it should never have been,
Commissioner Parker?
yes,
It does, the whole northern portion of it.
that strip, it's not highlighted in
So-
here as part of the property.
So that strip is actually owned by the city. And one of the reasons why it is owned by the city is that there's not supposed to be any driveway onto Long Street in that location because of the slope of the street and the bridge going across the creek. And so it's one of the reasons why what is the name of it? Anyway, there are areas where the city has strips of land like that are specifically there to prevent certain access to city streets.
But there is a division between the property and the right of way.
Sure. I mean, it can't connect to Long without city permission. Because
So
of
it
that strip
doesn't
of land.
connect to Long.
It doesn't, but nothing can be developed between it and Long Street.
Okay.
I understand what you're saying.
Another thought. If we approve this tonight, we are signing off for anything in the future. And it could have and maybe should have been more appropriate to apply for this in a development plan at the same time so we'd know a little more of what was planned.
Well, to be clear,
We're
we're
not-
making a
That-
decision.
yeah,
We're just,
zoning.
we're sending it to the city. Like,
We're not
like,
making
we're,
a
we're sending it to the city council to decide.
We're forwarding a recommendation to city
Mhm.
council in regards to
But
our
they-
opinion on the
They
zoning
tend to
change.
respect what we recommend.
So on that,
Yeah.
I will just add, we don't have the ability to force applicants to
Do both.
tell us exactly what they're going to build when they do this, mostly because there is a substantial amount of investment that it takes to have engineers draw up plans like that are based on the zoning. And so if there's not a firm reliance on what the zoning is, they can't justify that expenditure.
Correct.
And again, just to clarify, with this current zone, they could only build one property with an accessory property on it now?
In the
As an
current
R1.
zone, they could partition it
Okay.
and find a way of making a subdivision out of it. There is enough room with the property to do that. And as you're all aware, we are required by state law to allow duplexes in the residential R1 zone. And so at a base level, you have duplexes in there with the current zoning. One thing I also just want to make everyone aware of, multifamily housing consists of many, many different types of housing. There are cottage clusters, there are townhomes, there are apartment buildings, and they come in all shapes and sizes, and they're intended to serve a variety of niches in the market. So not to mention a variety of neighborhood feels, or the look and feel of a neighborhood. So again, it would be nice to know exactly what's going to be built there if the zoning was changed. All I can say is it could be all sorts of different things, and the owner would look at the market. The main way for the Planning Commission and for citizens to be involved in things like that is to adjust the code and adjust the comprehensive plan. We just spent the last couple of years updating our development code, and despite many, many advertisements of what we were doing, we did not have much in the way of comments when it comes to what these things should look like. And so that's really the best way to influence the look and feel of our community, is to be active at those times.
Chairman Parker, can I add to what?
Yes.
So also just a reminder that not only in the R1 zone are you allowed to build duplexes on any lot, the new Senate Bill 458 also allows you to divide each of those duplexes into separate lots. So that gives you a multifamily feel when you do that. So that is something we've actually had 2 applicants do that recently.
Right.
So you can now divide those duplexes, making it multiple lots. Just to remind you all that it's a state law, and we have to allow that now even in the R1 zone.
Correct. All right, so here we go. The discussion, if there's none further, I would look for a motion.
I would make a motion that we recommend to the city council to deny the application ZMA 23-03, just giving preference to the existing zone.
We have a motion. Looking for a second. I'll second it. So all those in favor of the motion, reminder that the motion is to deny the application. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Aye.
All right. So it looks like the application will be moving on to city council.
Point of order.
Yes,
The motion was to deny,
correct,
and the motion failed.
correct.
A new motion.
I would suggest a new motion to approve if
Correct.
you want to move forward.
Okay,
So that's one of you four.
Just looking for the right wording.
I'll make a motion. I move that we recommend to the city council to approve this application ZMA 23-03, which includes adopting the findings of fact listed in the staff report.
I second.
okay, we have a motion and a second. Reminder that this motion is to approve the application ZMA 2303. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Aye. All right. So this application will be going before city council. If anyone wishes to attend a city council meeting and make your opinions known at that time, that would be the time to do it.
That would be December 12th at 6:30 p.m.
December 12th, 6:30 p.m. in the same room.
Maybe remind them that it can be appealed.
Yeah, they're going.
Okay.
So,
All right.
all right. Next order of business is can all right, so we're going to go ahead and open the public hearing for VR 23-04 at 7:39 p.m. The applicant is seeking a variance to allow for a 3-foot interior side setback along 14 feet of a proposed duplex. The subject property is zoned commercial highway C2. The comprehensive plan designation is high density residential R3. Per Sweet Home Municipal Code amendments approval on July 25th, 2023 and effective August 24th, 2023, duplexes shall be allowed and permitted use in the C2 zone. Per Sweet Home Municipal Code 17.20.020A, duplexes, multifamily dwellings, and residential facilities shall be in the requirements for the R3 zone. Sweet Home Municipal Code 17.14. Per Sweet Home Municipal Code 17.14.060, the interior side setback is 5 feet per story. The remainder of the proposed duplex, approximately 29 feet, is within the 10% quantifiable setback standards. Excuse me. The applicable substantive criteria are listed in the staff report. Testimony, arguments, and evidence must be directed toward the criteria described or other criteria in the plan or land use regulation which the person believes to apply to the decision. Failure to raise an issue accompanied by the statements or evidence sufficient to afford the decision maker and the parties an opportunity to respond to the issue precludes the appeal to the Land Use Board of Appeals based on that issue. In regards to this application, does anybody on the Planning Commission have any personal bias in regards to this application?
No.
I have none. Any conflicts of interest?
No.
No.
Any ex parte information?
No.
I did talk to Mr. Hurley at the end of our last meeting. And I don't know if that conversation has affected anything here. As far as I can tell, it has not. So, So at that point, we'll go to staff for the staff report.
All right, so just to make the commission aware, so the administrative decision was approved for the adjustment. The adjustment application was filed for separately in its administrative decision. So it was approved for his the under 10% quantifiable standard for the other setbacks. So these are both reliant on each other. So this one will be null and void if this one doesn't pass and vice versa. So just to make you aware that that one was passed. The other reason this is coming back before you, not only did Mr. Hurley redesign it, but I made a mistake. On the original application, I steered him wrong and we emphasized some of the wrong setbacks, and that was my fault. When we went to go review it, we realized that the original discussion we had was what he was supposed to be applying for, and I mistakenly went a different way. So I encouraged him to reapply. He did submit another design, but I want to make that make you all very aware that it was partially my mistake for actually putting some of the wrong information in there. So, so I will move on. All right, as Chairman Parker stated, the applicant is seeking a variance to allow for a 3-foot interior side setback along 14 feet of the proposed duplex. As stated also, application BR 23-04 is being filed simultaneously with application AD 2301. AD 2301 is now been decided on by Director Larson. It will not be decided on by the Planning Commission. It's already been done. At the time that we submitted the staff report, it was still in review. So based on the review of the FEMA flood insurance map, the subject property is not in the special flood hazard area. The subject property does not have wetlands or waterways on the property that are depicted on the Sweet Home Local Wetlands Inventory and National Wetlands Inventory map. Subject property has access from 22nd Avenue, Larch Street, and an alley on the north property boundary. The subject property has access to city water services on 22nd Avenue and in the alley abutting the north property line of the subject property. The subject property has access to city sewer services in the alley abutting the north property line of the subject property. The review and design criteria in section 3. A variance is necessary because the subject development code provisions does not account for special or unique physical circumstances of the subject site, existing development patterns, or adjacent land uses. A legal lot determination may be sufficient evidence of a hardship for purposes of approving a variance. Per Sweet Home Municipal Code 17.106.060A. The applicant is asking for a 3-foot setback along 14 feet of the proposed duplex. 28.5 feet of the proposed duplex is within the 10% quantifiable interior side setback standards of the R3 zone. The subject property is a pre-existing non-conforming lot. The lot area is approximately 3,468 square feet. The minimum lot size for a duplex in the R3 zone is 5,000 square feet. The lot is abnormally shaped with an existing foundation that the applicant wishes to use to reduce development costs. Staff finds that the unique physical circumstances of the subject property make a variance necessary for the applicant to build the proposed duplex shown on the site plan on attachment B. Such variance is necessary for the preservation and enjoyment of a substantial property right of the applicant possessed by the owners of other properties in the same vicinity or district. An economic hardship shall not be the basis of a variance request. Subject property abuts non-conforming residential properties in the C2 zone to the north, east, and west. As seen in attachment 8, the proposed variance shall allow the applicant to preserve and enjoy the property rights the same as the owners of the other non-conforming properties in the vicinity. The authorization of such variance will not be material detrimental to the public welfare or injurious to the properties in the vicinity or district in which the property is located, or otherwise conflict with the objectives of any city plan or policy. Staff finds that the variance will not be material detrimental to the public welfare or injurious to the property in the vicinity or district in which the property is located. The variance does not conflict with the objectives of any city plan or policy. The need for a variance is not self-imposed as by the applicant or the property owner. For example, the variance request does not arise as a result of a property line adjustment or land division approval previously granted to the applicant. The request for the variance did not arise because of a property line adjustment or partition. The applicant is requesting to develop a duplex on a pre-existing non-conforming 3,468 square foot lot, the size and abnormal shape of the lot make it necessary for the applicant to apply for a variance in order to utilize the existing foundation and reduce development costs. The variance requested is the minimum variance which would alleviate the identified hardship. A previous variance application was submitted by the applicant on July 26, 2023. On September 21st, 2023, the Planning Commission denied the application. Staff met with the applicant to discuss options for moving forward, at which time staff discovered that the incorrect variance had been applied for at the direction of staff. The applicant submitted a revised site plan for review and worked with staff to identify the minimum variance to alleviate the hardship because of the size and shape of the property. Staff feels that the request for a 3-foot setback along 14 feet of the duplex is the minimum variance needed. All other setbacks are below the 10% quantifiable setback standards. All applicable building code requirements and engineering design standards shall be met. If approved, the applicant shall comply with the City of Sweet Home's engineering standards, Sweet Home Municipal Code 17.14, Residential High Density R3 Zone, and the Oregon Residential Specialty Code. Staff finds that the applicant has requested the minimum variance necessary to alleviate the hardship due to the physical circumstances of the subject property. Staff has recommended conditions of approval listed below. In conclusion, the application shall be subject to the compliance with the conditions listed below as required by the findings of fact presented in the review criteria in section 3 above. Any modifications to the conditions listed below would require approval in accordance with provisions of law. For example, variance, subsequent land use application, etc. Conditions of approval. 1, the final configuration of the proposed duplex shall substantially conform to the plot plan reviewed in this application, as seen in attachment B. 2, administrative approval of adjustment application AD 23-01 shall be required. Approval of application BR 23-04 shall be denied should the KED director deny application AD 23-01. 3, all development shall comply with the City of Sweet Home engineering standards and the development standards of the Sweet Home Municipal Code 17.14.070. And 4, the applicant shall demonstrate that the duplex will meet Oregon Residential Specialty Code. Planning Commission action. The Planning Commission will hold a public hearing at which it may either approve or deny the application. The application is denied. The action must be based on the applicable review and decision criteria. The appeal period. Staff recommends the Planning Commission's decision on this matter be subject to a 12-day appeal period from the date that the decision is mailed. Order. After the Planning Commission makes a decision, staff recommends the Planning Commission direct staff to prepare an order that is signed by the chairperson of the Planning Commission. The order shall memorialize the decision and provide the official list of conditions, if any, that apply to the approval if the application is approved. Motion. After opening the public hearing and receiving testimony, the Planning Commission's options include the following. 1, move to approve application BR 23-04 and thereby permit the variance for the subject lot located at 1307 22nd Avenue, Sweet Home, Oregon 97386, identified on the Linn County Assessor's Map as 13S01E 32BC, tax lot 02700, adopting the findings of fact listed in section 3 of the staff report, the setting of a 12-day appeal period from the date of the mailing of the decision, and hereby direct staff to prepare an order to be signed by the chair to memorialize this decision. 2, move to deny application BR 23-04 and thereby deny the request for a variance of the subject lot located at 1307 22nd Avenue, Sweet Home, Oregon 97386, identified on the Linn County Assessor's Map as 13S01E 32BC, tax lot 02700, adopting the finding of fact and specify the setting of a 12-day appeal period from the date of the mailing of decision, and hereby direct staff to prepare an order to be signed by the chair to memorialize this decision. 3, move to continue the public hearing to a date and time certain, or 4, other. Diane, you don't have to, by the way.
She's just gotten good at it.
Henry tells me to slow down.
Yeah. All right. Does anybody have any questions for staff?
So our focus now is on the side setback.
Yeah, the back right corner.
Yeah, that's my question. We're really just talking about 3 feet for a 14-foot length of wall.
So this
Yeah.
area,
properties.
if you're looking at the screen, this area right here
That's it.
is the only remaining area that does not comply.
Okay.
Everything else fits, which was not easy.
Yeah, that's a puzzle piece, that one.
All right. So it is just that
That
14-foot
14-foot
stretch.
strip.
little teeny corner. That's it. Okay. Everything else is okay.
Mm-hmm. Any further questions for staff before I invite the applicant?
No.
All right, this time, if our applicant would like to come forward.
If he dares face us again.
All right, and just a
Oh,
reminder.
You don't live here. 'Cause
Yeah.
We do have an empty seat.
Yeah. Just a reminder, if you could just state your name and address for the record.
James Hurley, 1307 22nd, or 35890 Santiam Highway.
Okay.
So went back to the drawing board. Got the garages in there for you guys. Got the 20-foot setback on the driveway for you, so you have driveway. So now what I applied for in the first one, which was the whole reason I came before I realized that little line cut me off on my 20 feet because the property line in the front I thought was square, and that's when I realized it. But the whole reason I came was for that 3 feet setback back there because of the jog out. And of course, the neighbors have 2 sheds right there, so I can't quite say, hey, can I give you a little bit of money and we'll do a line adjustment so I could get a little bit more property here. So I don't think they're going to give that up. So here I am again. See your lovely faces to see if you could approve that to get the duplex on there with everything else in place. I'm smart enough, as my business partner said, to do something twice. So I think he was calling me dumb for coming back, but here I am.
It's all right. Does anybody have any questions for our applicant?
Nope. No.
All right.
All right.
It's clear.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank
All
you
right.
for coming back.
Yes, thank you for returning. At this time, any proponent testimony, those wishing to speak in favor of the application, this would be the time to do so. Any opponent testimony, those wishing to speak in opposition of this application? Any neutral testimony, those wishing not to speak in favor or against, just wishing to be heard? All right, if there are none, we will close the public hearing at 7:55 for discussion amongst the Planning Commission.
Well, I'm happy to see an application for this property come back
Mm-hmm.
so quickly to our desk, and also that's clear in this application now that the property is requiring the variance based on the shape and of the property there.
I again, like you're saying, I'm happy to see someone come back in a timely manner and try to address all the concerns that we had in the previous.
I trust that we meant what we said.
Mm-hmm.
No, I think the variance for that little bit, which would allow this piece of property to be developed into a good, useful piece of property, I see no reason why we should object to that.
I agree.
All right.
I think the greater good is served by embracing the 3 feet by 14 feet.
Yeah, what are we?
And it does, I mean, it makes sense because of all the small lots are all non-conforming. We know
Yeah.
that something strange was going to have to be built here and wasn't going to be perfect.
And the
This
great,
doesn't impede any driving. We don't have to worry that we might be causing problems for, future development or
Or the
anything.
neighbors.
It's just, these are neighbors. This is neighbor happiness that we're creating.
well, and it also, as I was saying earlier, that this does relate back to our housing needs assessment of having some of this type of housing.
And this is a great location for a property like
Close
that.
to our
So great.
amenities, shopping, medical.
I've lived on property with a 3-foot sidewalk rear yard. It's okay.
Yeah, and technically, we're looking at what, 28 square feet total, because we're missing. Yeah. Yeah. So if there's no other discussion amongst the Planning Commission, I would look for a motion.
I would, but I can't read. I mean, I can read. I just don't have glasses.
Don't have your
I'm so
glasses.
sorry.
How did you
Everything's
get to where you
blurry.
are in life?
Welcome to Sweet Home.
Sweet home graduate.
I'll bring an extra pair next week.
Thank you. I was saying it when I walked in. I'm like, all this is really fuzzy.
I'll make a motion to approve the application VR 2304 and thereby permit the variance for the subject lot located at 1307 22nd Avenue, Sweet Home, Oregon, identified on Lynn County Assessor's map as 13S01E32BC tax lot 02700, adopting the findings and fact listed in section 3 of the staff report and setting a 12-day appeal period from the date of the mailing of the decision, and hereby direct staff to prepare an order to be signed by the chair to memorialize this decision.
I second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right. Variance granted.
Persistence pays off.
That's right. Yeah, we don't want to go down that road. Yeah. All right, so at this time, that concludes the bulk of our public hearing, and we're gonna move along to any possible staff updates.
We don't
we may
have a
see
lot
in-
of applications. As of right now, we may not have planning commission meetings in December. We don't have any business on our board, on Diane's board.
Yeah. So do we
I had
have,
to walk
do we have
around.
a no more Angela date at some point, or are
I
you
will
gonna
probably,
continue to grace
because
us?
our land use applications are so different. They're very different. She's going to be taking over, yes, but I will still be here to support her when we have wild and crazy things that come up. And so you may see me again, just as support staff.
So I have a question. At one point a while back, we had seen the possibility of something coming that was way out Long Street.
You talking about a subdivision?
Yeah,
Is that?
way out,
who was
yeah,
that?
to the right,
There.
off like 48.
We did have a pre-application. We had a pre-application meeting with some folks about a property out there for a subdivision,
They haven't submitted.
and they haven't submitted yet, but
Oh,
they have
okay.
done their wetland delineation, and they sent it on to us, and it wasn't terribly different than what we thought we would see. But we, as of yet, we have not received a full application for that or anything, or word on exactly what their timing is. I expect that a lot of that is related to simply interest rates and that kind of thing. I think once we see some decline in those interest rates, we probably will see that pick up again. But I was actually really excited about that because it had a real actual grid street network, and it was kind of cool to see. It was a number of, if I remember correctly, it was quite a few units too that they were proposing for single family home
I think
lots.
in both phases. So there's actually 2 large properties. And one of them had more wetlands than the other, but I think it was like total of both phases were like 80.
Yeah, 80 or 90 homes. I don't know if they were actually going to be able to get to that. It's south of Long. It's south of there actually. So basically this southeastern portion of the city.
Couple blocks off,
48, 49, I can't remember.
couple blocks off
I want to
Long.
say 47th. but I can't-
Yeah, somewhere in the 40s.
Down at the bottom end of 47th.
Yeah, it's like
Like that.
way down.
So have
Down
you
there.
been in touch with a lady whose name I can't remember, even though I've been told it several times, who makes cakes in
Taylor
town?
Made?
Yes,
I have.
because she's looking for a place for
Right.
a place.
I have
And I
had
just,
extensive discussions with her.
Good,
And
okay.
some other some property owners as well. So I'm hoping we find a home for it. By a home for her business. She has a home.
Yeah.
So as another update, as we all know, that we went through this our zone amendments, and there are a few more that I have subsequently found. I was waiting for Diane to come on board, and so we can run through that process. But you will be seeing a few more just minor amendments that we found, and so we'll be bringing that probably after the first of the year. We'll be bringing those. I can't say it'll be the last of the corrections. I can never say that because we're always amending them.
It's
but-
a living document.
Yes, so we will be bringing a few more back, just some things that I caught going through there, and obviously we'll probably catch more as we go. So,
Other staff updates, just as I mentioned to the audience earlier, trying to drum up as much activity as I can. Transportation system plan update, open house is on November 29th, 6:30. Before that, at 5 is the advisory committee meeting. So those who, I believe Commissioner Wood and Commissioner Melcher talked about being a part of that. So if you haven't gotten an email about that, let me know.
also, Blair, to add to that, if you are all planning on going, please let us know because we will need to notice it as a quorum.
Yeah.
Oh,
The open
If-
house
if-
portion.
Yes.
If all of you think that you might pop in, we will need to notice it.
I'm thinking I'll be there.
Okay.
What time is it at?
6:30 is when the open house is at. So we have 3 at least that will be there.
We'll go ahead and notice it.
We
just
better
in case.
notice it
Yeah.
just in case.
Yeah,
there's a possible forum.
I'm not sure.
Okay.
I haven't checked my calendar,
Just
aka
send us an
wife.
email reminder.
If we notice it, then we're covered.
Yes, yeah, this doesn't count.
And other than that,
Yes.
I don't really have any other staff updates. So,
Okay.
Been quiet on
No,
this front.
no interest yet in our vacant seat down there.
We are continuing to advertise that, and we were a little slow on getting it advertised because Julie used to do all those advertising
Right.
for us, and then she was gone. And so now we have a new Julie. Her name is Cecily. She's great. If you haven't met her, come on by and meet her. So hopefully we will hear some things soon. And I've been talking it up in any opportunity that I have, especially to people in the past who have complained to me about not being able to be involved
Right.
because they live outside city limits. And so now I keep on telling him, hey, we've got one now that is outside city limits. Please come join us.
Yeah.
So,
One of those people is having knee surgery. I've been working on her.
all right. Well, if you afterward want to tell me the name of that person, I will lean on that person as well.
Don't lean too hard. You might knock her over.
Well,
It sounds like
on the good knee.
on the good knee. Yeah.
In December, and she was worried I'm going to miss meetings.
She could come in virtual as well.
Well, not only that, but it takes a little time to actually get appointed. So,
Yeah, there's a process.
You have to go through the
City
is it
council.
finance? Is it finance committee that has to?
so the
approve that?
admin, property, and finance committee usually reviews appointments or applicants, and then it goes to the city council.
All right. So if there's nothing else, we'll go ahead and adjourn the meeting for November 16th at 8:05.
Strong work, Sarah.
Thank you very much.
My only thing on that property was, I just feel that comprehensive plan